I've been wanting to discuss this story for almost 5 years now, because this is one of the times where I need to take responsibility for what I did, even though at the time it did not seem like a big deal. Hi everyone, my name is Christine. I am going to be discussing something that occurred in Farmington, New Mexico in September of 2019 as I was driving across the country, and it relates to the overall topic of twin flames and entity attachments. If you are interested in catching up with this story, I will link my previous 7 videos down below that will give you a background. But right now I'm just going to get right into it. So I spent a couple of days in September of 2019 with my friend Jenny in Albuquerque, New Mexico, and her family. And it was wonderful to see her. I said my goodbyes and I started my drive from Albuquerque to Farmington. And that's about a 3 to 4 hour drive. And I am not familiar at all with the area. That was my first time. And the reason why I wanted to go to Farmington is I was very interested in seeing the Four Corners area of the United States. I was excited about Farmington because I didn't know what to expect. And I was very interested in seeing the smaller towns of the United States because for the most part, I've always lived in the larger coastal cities. When I started driving, it was up these mountain roads and it was just pouring down rain. I couldn't see in front of me and I didn't know the roads very well at all. So I was just going really slow in the right-hand lane. And if I recall correctly, there really wasn't a place to pull over. So I was just praying to God that I was not going to get into an accident because the rain was so intense. But what's interesting is by the time I got to Farmington, about 3.5 hours later, it was bright and sunny. When I got to the house, this was an Airbnb rental. And I'm not sure what Airbnb is like today in 2024, but in 2019, I got some really great deals driving across the country using Airbnb. And this particular Airbnb, I was able to stay, I believe it was $50 for the night total. And initially it was supposed to be just my bedroom with my own bathroom. But the people that were renting out their house said, hey, we're going to be away. You can have the whole house, which I thought was extremely generous of them. And they just had their bedroom locked and the house was beautiful. It was a really gorgeous house in a beautiful area. And I felt so fortunate because my next city that I was going to be Denver, and I was going to see an ex-girlfriend of mine, actually my first ex-girlfriend, and her husband. So I was going to be spending time with them too. And I tend to be an introvert. So it was just great that I was able to have this entire beautiful, clean house to myself. So I entered the house. Everything was beautiful, very well kept. And the first thing I noticed is I didn't know anything about these people, but they were very hardcore Christians. And I noticed all around the house everything related to Christ. And I took pictures of some of these things, and I'm actually grateful I did take pictures now because this video literally is going to be a public apology to these people. The next morning, Mr. Catalyst and I were messaging back and forth. And Mr. Catalyst is a person that came into my life in July, came into my life in July of 2019. I had known him from high school. He still lived in the Philadelphia area, and we had made plans to meet up when I relocated back to Philadelphia. Like I said, this is all on my previous videos, so I don't want to get too far into this. But Mr. Catalyst is just a name I've given him because he caused or initiated a great amount of change in my life. And so the next morning, I was messaging with Mr. Catalyst, and it was almost like he was there with me. And I legitimately wanted to share this experience with him because it was so interesting. And I just thought, wow, let me share this, this with him, because these people are really hardcore Christians. And I wasn't like, oh, these people are really hardcore Christians, ha ha ha. But I did have a bit of an arrogant edge to me. And I'm not part of any organized religion. I'm not part of the New Age. I do believe in Jesus Christ. And I won't get into my beliefs here. But what I did in sharing these pictures with Mr. Catalyst was just slightly mocking of these people's beliefs. And these people opened up their home to me, were extremely generous to me. And here I was showing various pictures that I'm going to put on the screen. So it wasn't anything pornographic or anything like that. But I was just slightly mocking how into Jesus Christ they were. Like, look at this, look at this, look at this. And to be honest with you, I'm showing this guy that I really don't even know. This is me looking back. I mean, we had dated briefly in high school. We had messaged for a few months. And at the time, I felt like I knew him more than I did. Let's just put it that way. And I thought, yeah, I just want to show him these because it's so interesting how into Jesus Christ these people are. And in doing so, I would say I had this just slight twist where I was arrogantly not only mocking my hosts who had been so generous to me, but I was mocking Christ. And what I'm going to say is I am a person who has for many years worked in the spiritual realm. And when you work in the spiritual realm, it is my belief that you are also responsible for your actions in the spiritual realm. Now, there are some people here on earth that, I'll be honest, they're just not there yet. That they use their five senses and that's the world that they exist in. And that's the world that they believe in. And they don't necessarily understand that there's a lot beyond that. I'm not here to convince anyone otherwise. If that's what you believe, that's fine. I've just had a lot of experiences in the spiritual realm. And the reason why I'm telling you this is I knew better. I knew better to mock Christ. Even though I'm not part of any religion, what was I thinking? I wasn't thinking. I was thinking I really like Mr. Catalyst and I had become very attracted to him, which was another thing that was unusual for me. But ever since I gave my consent in Las Vegas, and you can go back to my Las Vegas video, I had become increasingly, overwhelmingly physically attracted to this guy that I had not seen in 35 years. And I understand for some women that might seem normal if you're heterosexual, but I'm not. I'm mostly attracted to women. And the fact that I'm overwhelmingly attracted to this person hadn't seen him. It just kind of blew me away, and I thought for sure we're meant to be together. We were really clicking, and that's another reason I just felt like I was kind of on the inner track. Like, let me show you these pictures of Christ, and almost like how funny it is. And looking back on it now, I'll tell you, these are the things that get you in trouble. And I later came to regret it, because I just realized how naive I really was about how evil works. I didn't know at the time, but now I know. As I was driving across the country, I really trusted Mr. Catalyst's words. I trusted what he said. I trusted that we were going to at least get together and meet up in person. And after this experience, I realized that people's words are not worth going out on a limb for. And that's what I did with this situation. I risked, in a small way, a seemingly small way, I risked my own spiritual development for this person that I didn't even really know, and nor did I understand what was working through him. That morning we messaged for a few hours as I showed Mr. Catalyst around these people's house and laughed and joked with him about how into Jesus Christ they were. And like I said, I'm not proud of that now, and this video is a public apology to them. By this point, we had some very intense messaging sessions. This one alone was a couple of hours, pretty much straight back and forth. No sexting, but a lot of flirting. And I was really getting drawn into this situation. In looking back on it, it was almost like crack cocaine energy that I wanted more and more of. And I had no basis for comparison because I hadn't experienced anything like this before. And so I thought, surely this energy is so strong that it's something important, it's something serious, and I really can't wait to meet up with this person, even though I was a little bit intimidated because the feelings that I had were so strong. I didn't tell Mr. Catalyst any of this because I just wanted to keep it to myself, because the logical, rational part of my brain was like, okay, well, let's just see how this goes. At the time, I was 50 years old, and so I understood that sometimes things fall apart, and so part of me was just trying to hold part of myself in reserve. The other thing I'll say is that after these messaging sessions, I would almost have to recover because of how intense they were. And I thought that was a good thing at the time, that the energy was being drained out of me, because I didn't have a basis for comparison of a person that I would be involved with that would actually pour energy into me, or that it would be an even energetic exchange. And so I took this intensity, this crack cocaine energy intensity, and the fact that I was being drained, I just thought that the draining was a byproduct of having such an intense connection. I didn't do much in Farmington. It was really, really hot when I was there, like 96 or 97 degrees, which surprised me because it was early September and I thought it would be cooler. And the contrast between outside where it was just baking and the cool house was actually really reassuring and beautiful in some ways. Like I said, this couple who probably they weren't much older than I was, maybe like mid 50s or late 50s. They really did me a huge favor extending their home to me, and for that I will always be grateful. And then in the evenings, I would take a walk around the neighborhood, and it was a beautiful neighborhood. I would say upper middle class, very clean. It was just some of these towns that some of the East Coasters and West Coasters turn their nose up at are really quite clean, quiet, safe, and beautiful. And I was grateful to have the opportunity to experience that, because when I lived in Sacramento, when I would walk outside my door, like in our little apartment parking lot, a lot of times there would be homeless people. They would be using the water faucet, or they would build a tent in our parking lot. They would always be walking down the alley, and I just became very used to that as a lifestyle. And before I lived in Sacramento, I lived in New York City for 14 years, and so I was just very used to, sorry to say this, but dirt, filth, and there's a lot of great things about New York City too, don't get me wrong. But what I'm trying to say is that Farmington, New Mexico was very different than other areas where I had lived, and I mean that in the best sense. I did get a really strong Christian feeling about it, but sometimes I think, even though I'm not part of any organized religion, like maybe that's not such a bad thing. I understand that there's certain programming that goes with a lot of these religions that I don't necessarily agree with. And I think that that's one of the reasons why I was, in a seemingly subtle way, putting down these people who had extended their home to me. But who was I to do that? Who was I to make some type of determination as to the worthiness of their faith?